And we begin with breaking news. Right now, the window of opportunity is closing for firefighters in Southern California. This is the good news. The wind is dying down, and you can see the smoke going up rather than going to the side and running with the flames. It's a temporary break. As you can see, there are now a total of 6 fires still burning. 72 hours from now, the winds will pick back up. That is 72 hours for bone-tired firefighters to try and get an upper hand on those 6 fires. And tonight, for the very first time, the Los Angeles Fire Department is finally saying what we've known all along. The leadership at state and local levels did not do their jobs when it came to preparing for these large-scale fires that were predicted and were predictable. That's not us saying it. It's the Los Angeles Fire Department Chief, Kristen Crowley, on Fox 11 Los Angeles.
Did the city of Los Angeles fail you and your department and our city?
It's my job to stand up as a chief and exactly say, justifiably, what the fire department needs to operate to meet the demands of the community.
Did they fail you?
That is our job, and I tell you, that's why I'm here. So let's get us what we need so our firefighters can do their jobs.
Did they fail you?
Yes.
It hurts to admit that. Nobody wants to say that they're trying to fight with one arm tied behind their back. This was a failure on multiple levels. The LA Times now reports a key reservoir near Pacific Palisades was not even operating as the fire started. It's 117 million gallons of water rendered completely useless. And the reservoir wouldn't have given firefighters extended water pressure to fight the massive Palisades fire. That fire is now at 20,000 acres. And you can see there's other fires burning, although not in residential areas. Both the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire are now the top 5 most destructive fires in California history. Evacuation orders are still in place for more than 150,000 people. A little bit later on, we're going to talk about why all this matters. We just learned Governor Gavin Newsom invited President Trump out to California to survey the damage. And while the brave men and women fighting these fires are doing their jobs at great personal risk and with an unbelievable amount of bravery, there are growing questions, righteous questions, about whether the leadership in California prepared for a fire of this magnitude. For their part, confused Californians on the ground told our reporters they are understandably less than thrilled with leadership during this crisis. Here's one woman who lost her home describing the lack of communication from Los Angeles city officials.
What does your family need? What do your neighbors need?
That's a good question. Answers and a sense of direction. Because I think a lot of people are kind of like, okay, what do we do next? What do we do next?
Los Angeles Fire Department Captain Adam Vangerpin is standing by with details on where these fires are headed and the fight. First, team coverage tonight, NewsNation's Nancy Liu in Altadena. We start with senior national correspondent Brian Enton, live in Pacific Palisades, where the National Guard has arrived. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening, Leland. Yeah, the National Guard, you see there behind me, they've got all their equipment out here. They're helping to secure the area because of looting, which we're going to get to later in the show. But you mentioned the frustration. I mean, people want answers. Today, Governor Newsom said that he is asking for an independent investigation into why the hydrants aren't working. And you go out to talk to people, they're relieved by that, but they want to make sure that it's actually independent, that they find out what really went wrong. The last couple of days we've been out, even yesterday, the hydrants, there was no water coming out. We were here in the Palisades. There was a house that reignited. Fire department shows up. They hook the hose up to the hydrant, and you could see the look of frustration on their faces, Leland. There was no water coming out, and they start shouting out to each other, find a pool nearby, a residential swimming pool. They've been having to go to residential swimming pools to get water in many of these neighborhoods, Leland.
Yeah, and that story repeated itself over and over and over again. As we find during these situations, it's not when one thing goes wrong, it's when many things went wrong, and that certainly is the case there. Boy, live pictures, as you can see, firefighters on the fire lines right now with a roaring blaze. There's been these discussions about how these fires keep starting. One of the more obvious answers would be arson. Last night, police officers detained someone on suspicion of arson and talked to Brian about that. And today, they are telling a very different story about that. Take a listen.
So someone purposely set the Kenneth fire?
At this time, that's what we believe, yes.
After the interview and additional investigative steps, looking at some additional evidence that was present, they made the determination that there was not enough probable cause to arrest this person on arson or suspicion of arson, and therefore this person was arrested on a felony probation violation.
But he had a blowtorch, right, Brian?
Yeah, he had a blowtorch. He was on video. We were out there last night. That was the fire that started last night, the most recent one, the Kenneth fire, and it was turned into a crime scene. The police told us out there this is now a crime scene. We saw more LAPD than we did firefighters. They had the crime scene unit out there. They said this was definitely arson. We've got someone in custody. There was actually witnesses, regular people who saw this guy trying to start the fire, they said, and they were able to tackle him, get him into custody. Today, we were trying to figure out, okay, who is he? What's the story? And they said, didn't get enough probable cause. And they haven't answered any more questions about what they figured out in terms of the arson.
Absolutely wild. There's that old parable about a duck. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, might be a duck. But who knows? As you're talking to your police sources, Brian, and as you're hearing on this, are they looking at arson in these other fires, possibly?
We haven't heard that, obviously, for sure, with the Kenneth fire. I mean, it was obvious last night. But are they all connected? Look, you talk to the people who's lost their houses, and they hear about the fact that police said it was arson last night, even though it was the Kenneth fire and not this fire. They want answers. I mean, they want to know exactly how it started, what led to all of this, and if one of them is now arson, does it perhaps mean that the others could be too? We didn't get those answers today.
Yeah. No, and I think it's going to be a while until we do get any of those. All right, Brian, back to you a little later in the show about the looting and the security angle to all of this as people are trying to take advantage of this situation. Brian Enton, to lead us off, Captain Adam Vangerpin of the Los Angeles Fire Department is with us now. Captain, I'm watching this, and obviously there's still live fires going on. We're seeing huge flames. I'm not sure if you can see our screen, but the helicopters are showing that. Aerial drops happening. But are you feeling at least optimistic that you're starting to get an upper hand?
Yes, we are feeling like we are starting. We have about an 8% containment right now, and that is the smoke right behind me that you can see that you're showing on your video. So we are anticipating that our red flag conditions are supposed to end around 6 o'clock tonight. So after the red flag conditions end, then we hope that we can start to increase some of our containment numbers. But we still have over 200 firefighters on scene, so we're not letting up. We are still fighting this fire on multiple fronts. We have firefighters throughout the fire looking for spot fires and just keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, I can not imagine really how bone tired. I know how tired Brian Enton, Nancy Liu, their crews are. I cannot imagine how your firefighters are feeling now, almost 90 hours into this. Help us understand, though, and we always hear this number, 0% contained makes sense to anybody. It means it's not contained. What are we seeing, and what is the difference between it being contained and you all are able to keep houses from burning?
So when you hear containment numbers, those numbers are meaning that we are completely surrounded the fire in that area, meaning that there's no embers, no possibility of it reigniting. So we can show that on a map where we can show containment numbers. But those containment numbers aren't going to start to increase until we get out of this extreme fire behavior. The fire weather that we had was unlike anything we have seen in a very long time. We had wind gusts up to 99 miles an hour. So when we're spraying water, it's going 90 degrees to the side. So we're showing pictures right now of some of the aerial drops of fire retardant, and now by the red flag warning going down, I'm feeling that has something to do with the wind. You got 48 hours. What does the next 48 hours of this fight look like, both from the air and from the ground? So we're going to try and knock down as much of this fire as we can in those next 48 hours while we do have a lull in the wind. But even when we're out of red flag conditions, that's not to say that the wind can't pick back up. So we are trying to increase those containment numbers once we get out of the red flag conditions, because we do have another anticipated red flag conditions coming up next week. So we're trying to get those containment numbers as best we can, so we can get ahead of this fire. So right now we still have. At
this point, do you feel as though you have enough resources when it comes to manpower and equipment? Has the cavalry arrived?
So we still have firefighters are arriving on scene. So we have, with the over 2,300, they're coming in from all over the state. So we have, and we also are getting partners from around the nation. So this is, we have enough resources on scene right now, and there still are more arriving as we speak.
All right. So I'm not sure if you can see what we would call return, which is the screen that we're showing. It's a helicopter shot of large sort of rolling flames through hills with some fire teams around. But it looks like they've started to be able to build fire breaks and then also drop fire retardant. Are we at the point now where at least the fires that are burning are not going to go run through another 500 or 1,000 homes?
Yeah, so right now we're out of our extreme weather conditions that we have. We are still in a red flag condition, meaning that if we're having 20, 30-mile-an-hour winds, so right up where you're looking at is up in the hilltop. So as you get higher up in elevation, you get sometimes an increase in the wind speed. So where we are right now, we're mostly doing spot fires around the houses that have previously burned, and we're watching to make sure that we don't have embers starting new fires. What you're looking at is up in the mountain areas, and that is what we are concerned with.
Last question. How you doing after 90 hours of this? When was the last time you guys slept?
You know, we're the first 2 nights, I don't think any firefighter slept. It was round the clock. It was all hands on deck. This is what we trained to do, but there definitely is some exhaustion out there. But, you know, our number one priority is life safety. And those first few nights, that was 100% our operation. We were putting people inside fire engines to get them out of these extreme danger. I myself even driving around in a public information officer vehicle, putting people inside there to get them out of the smoke and who were running from flames. So this was all hands on deck, but this is what our firefighters are trained to do.
And a week, I don't think anybody in California, certainly not in Los Angeles, will soon forget. Captain, thank you for being with us. Godspeed to you and your men.
Thank you.
Yeah. Every day, we learn more and more about how preventable this tragedy was, from the water problems to budget cuts to DEI demands at the Los Angeles Fire Department. Over and over again, the brand new reporting from the Los Angeles Times about the decisions made by Mayor Bass and Governor Newsom when we come back. Continue to watch the flames climb throughout Topanga Canyon. The fire's really unprecedented destruction. We can see the airdrops coming in right now, are a rightful and painful mirror on the policies of the far left. And that's the subject of tonight's Why It Matters memo. Today, we learned that Governor Gavin Newsom recently cut $100 million from the state's fire prevention budget, all the times warning that fires were going to get worse. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now Newsom is showing real concern with what he deems to be one of the biggest threats to Los Angeles County residents. And he talked about it, in fact. Here he is at a briefing at the White House.
We've got to deal with this misinformation. There were hurricane force winds of mis and disinformation, lies. People want to divide this country, and we're going to have to address that as well. And it breaks my heart as people are suffering and struggling that we're up against those hurricane forces as well.
President Biden nodded along that somehow Governor Newsom is the real victim in this catastrophe. Here's the deal. We'll deal with facts. The state of California, at least Los Angeles, is burning. We've known the fires were coming for years. By example after example, California's leaders, Gavin Newsom at the top, chose green do-gooding rather than doing their job protecting the state from these fires. Simple politics. Now they're blaming misinformation. California's one-party rule for more than a decade turned California, and specifically Los Angeles, into a progressive utopia. And when there were warnings last week about unprecedented fires, the Daily Mail reports Mayor Karen Bass reportedly demanded more budget cuts from the LA Fire Department and then left for Ghana after the warnings came out. The next part of this is tricky because we don't want to disparage anyone, and you can watch them right now, who are on the front lines of these still rapidly growing fires. People are risking their lives day in, day out, brave men and women. But it has become clear to many that California leaders have put their efforts into equity and diversity of the fire department rather than a fire department that saves lives. Take a look at this video of the recently promoted deputy chief of the department.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
It's almost like a Saturday Night Live skit if it wasn't about recruiting firefighters who are now on the front lines. We're 90 hours into the fires, and all the excuses by Democrats about why it's not their fault are falling apart. And now the leaders are fighting with each other, which you know things have gotten bad. With us now, owner and executive chairman of the Los Angeles Times, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, whose paper just today released an explosive investigative report on how ill-prepared Los Angeles was for these devastating wildfires. They report, quoting now, Pacific Palisades Reservoir was offline and empty when the firestorm exploded. It's good to see you, sir. Thank you. Never is local news reporting and important reporting needed more in times like this. When your team of reporters brought you this, that the reservoir was offline and empty, what was your response?
That it's so crazy that we have leaders that are reactive rather than proactive. I mean, it really emphasizes what I tweeted yesterday about issues of competence. And I think that's when we're really concerned. We don't elect people with great operational competence.
It's never when one thing goes wrong, it's when multiple things goes wrong. We argued last night that what we are seeing is not a failure, but is a success of policies, that the policies that were put in place have led to these events. Is that pretty much how you see it as well?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, right, there's really no surprise that we would have fires. In fact, we lived through a fire just a couple of years ago. So the idea that, for example, we don't create fire breaks, we actually reduce the budget. We actually don't inspect the hydrants. Apparently we'll be doing this investigation of a valve that actually could have actually increased the pressure, the absence of water in the reservoirs. Now you hear all these excuses, and I just heard this excuse about disinformation. I mean, I think that's outrageous when you have thousands of acres burning and 10 people are dead, so at least. So, yes, I think the policies were misplaced. We have to ask our questions, where are we spending the money and why? And what is the sort of planning and the logistics skill sets of actually preparing ahead for this?
$20 billion spent by Governor Newsom on the homeless problem, if you will, their projects in California. The homeless rates went up. I say this respectfully because the best defense against incompetence and these kinds of policies is local news, is tough reporting and asking hard questions and not buying into the policies, certainly not of one-party rule, either Republican or Democrat. Is you're now looking back at how the LA Times operated, say, over the past 5 or 6 years, are you seeing that you all missed stories as well?
Well, I got into a little trouble, as I sort of pointed out, prior to the election when I blocked, apparently, blocked the endorsement of Vice President or President-elect or President who wanted to be Kamala Harris. And I think what we have really was a state and now even a organization that was very progressive. And again, I'll get into trouble for that, where we have basically groupthink.
At the paper.
At the paper, at the opinion section, and so I needed to have really what I call critical thought, and to sort of bring it. Now, with this event, we really must investigate, and that's really the basis of the paper, speaking truth to power, and really investigating the root cause of all these issues and making sure that this doesn't happen again.
Are you seeing among your reporters, and look, the first step, right, obviously, in any problem is admitting you have the problem and dealing with it honestly, but are you seeing among your reporters, your editors, the opinion pages, sort of a wake-up here of what they've missed? Is there any, I don't even want to say shame, but embarrassment in the newsroom of, oh my God, there were all these amazing stories out there and we missed because we were too in love with the progressive policies?
Well, look, in fairness to the team during this crisis, I must admit that they really worked very hard, and they really, as you said, we were pointed out that we had one of the best coverages. Having said that, I was really pleased to see this morning, and I tweeted about Mary McManara, who really then called out, because she's one of our columnists, personally affected by this fire in our home. And so finally we're calling out, rather than sort of soft peddling the excuses or buying into the excuses by both Karen Bass and the governor. And this is our job now, to really call out the facts. And the facts of the matter is, look, where are we spending the money? Why are we spending hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars, for a bullet train to Las Vegas, when we actually haven't figured out how to spend the money properly to actually prepare for this kind of firestorm?
Yeah. Look, my hero in television, Tom Brokaw, used to say it's not the questions that get us in trouble, it's the answers. And asking tough questions is what's important. I don't know if you were able to see this. The Special Assembly, or the California Assembly, is called the Special Session in Sacramento amidst the fires. Not to deal with the fires, but to deal with allocating money to take on Donald Trump. Take a listen.
While this wildfire is happening, and while people are trying to understand what's going on and are worried about disaster relief, worried about the ability to get homeowners insurance, your chamber gavelled into a special legislative session to prepare for Donald Trump in a way that you are already able to do without a special legislative session. So, again, is now the right time for that?
So certainly our focus right now is Speaker Ashley. At this moment, my colleagues and I, we are acting with great urgency to ensure that we're providing much needed relief.
Thoughts?
You know, the irony, President-elect Trump, about 3, 4, 5 years ago, before he was running for president, highlighted the need for California to deal with the water problem. We allow millions of gallons of water to run off into the ocean during the rain. We don't create these reservoirs. We don't create these fire breaks. And so this really speaks again to operational competence. And I think my concern really is, and we need to just openly address this, politicians or professional politicians, have they actually run logistics, run a job, made a payroll, really pragmatic things of understanding what to do, how to plan and be proactive rather than reactive. And what we have in California is not a surprise. We have earthquakes and we have fire.
Yeah. Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, you got a lot of work ahead of you, and important work at the Los Angeles Times. We're grateful for you spending a few minutes with us, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Looting during disasters is as old as time. It's been going on in Los Angeles, but is it possible the looters are starting fires so they can loot? The new evidence of arson when we come back. Well, first came the flames, and now residents are not only trying to fight off the flames, but also fight off looters. First always comes the disaster, then those trying to take advantage. 20 people have already been arrested for breaking into people's homes and stealing their valuables. Some are even going to the sites of burnt down homes and taking what they can from the ashes. California Governor Gavin Newsom posted on X, quote, "Looting will not be tolerated. These communities have suffered enough. The National Guard deployment will bring our total on-the-ground personnel to 8,000. We will continue to use every available resource to keep our communities safe." I read that this morning, and I had to chuckle through the sadness. Perhaps if Newsom hadn't allowed looting for the past 5 years to go on, unchecked all over California, then maybe the looters would take his threat seriously.
We just started seeing all these cars pull up, doors open, and groups of men running up our street, going up to the doors of these houses. And we weren't sure what was going on. There were like 100 people that came up on scooters and were trying to get into any and all houses on this street.
With us in a moment, Jason Oppenheim, star realtor of Netflix Selling Sunset. First, NewsNation's Brian Enton in Pacific Palisades at a checkpoint designed to stop looters. Is it really working, Brian?
I mean, look, they've really beefed up security here in the last 24 hours. It's interesting that interview you just played about the scooter looters. We saw people like that 2-3 nights ago when the fires were still active and they were so focused on the fires that anybody could get into these neighborhoods. It was like there was a blazing inferno, and you would see all of these guys on bikes or on scooters with backpacks, and it didn't make any sense at all because all the residents had evacuated. But yeah, this is a checkpoint behind me. You can see the National Guard there in the distance. They've come in over the last day. They're helping with security. They're manning a lot of the checkpoints, which allows LAPD to go into the neighborhoods here in the Palisades and patrol, try to keep the looters out. But what we've found talking to people, Leland, is it's less of the scooter looters and bike people, and now they've become more organized. We're hearing about groups of men coming in sprinter vans, like big groups in the back of the van that almost look like they're here to do some kind of work, and then they go out and they go inside the homes and take things. Listen to what one resident told me.
We have chased people away. There's some people who are active in the area who stayed behind, and they're reporting that we need help. And we think this latest crackdown is helpful, but we go around the streets, there's no one here, and anyone can come up here and get stuff, so we need help.
And it's interesting, that man and others, they've sort of formed these like community groups. They communicate when they can text. Service is so bad, and they keep an eye on each other's blocks.
Amazing. Real quick, Brian, I've talked to some friends out there who are trying to hire private security, and then hearing that the police won't allow the private security into these neighborhoods. So as you point out, now it's up to residents to basically protect the Alamo themselves.
Yeah, and the private security situation is interesting. They're telling me the phones are ringing off the hook. They are finding ways to get into these neighborhoods. I don't know how, because the police don't want to let any of them in right now, only first responders. But I talked to two of the owners of the private security companies, the two busiest in this area, who are managing to get into the Palisades. Listen to what they told me, Leland.
I've been hearing reports of large groups of people that are coming out of vans, like sprinter vans and like cargo vans, that is obviously well coordinated.
What are the items that you're hearing that they're going after?
Purses, watches, anything they could basically get their hands on.
So it's obviously a concern for the people who live here, who have already lost so much, Leland.
All right, Brian, thank you very much. Jason Oppenheim, president and founder of the Oppenheim Group, star realtor of Netflix's Selling Sunset. Jason, it's good to see you. Thank you. Wish it was under better circumstances. Something that's striking, right? And I think people don't really even understand it. If you're not from California, I'm not. I'm a Midwest kid. That what burned in the areas affected here, these are some of the fanciest places in all of Los Angeles, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say most of the Pacific Palisades is gone, probably 75% of it. And I'd say the average home there was maybe $3 to $4 million, certainly homes in the $5 to $10 million range. I've had clients and friends calling me all day, probably 40 to 50 calls actually from people that lost homes Several of them are former clients who I sold homes to them in the Palisades in the $5 to $10 million range, and they're all gone.
Wow. What happens to these folks? There's a finite number of homes. You're talking about, a couple of thousand, 6,000 maybe homes that will have been destroyed by this, many more damaged. Where do all those folks go?
That's such a good question. Right now, hotels, you can't find a hotel room. Forget about Los Angeles. You can't even find hotel rooms in Newport Beach, Orange County. All the way down to San Diego right now. So they're waiting in hotels until they can figure out with their insurance how much money they have to find a house. But we do have some clients that we are working with now to try to find property. And you wouldn't believe the stories. We had a client today. We showed him a house for $13,000 a month, that was the asking price on the MLS. And we offered $20,000 a month up front for 6 months. And the landlord countered us at $23,000, $10,000 more than he was even asking. You'll see lines of 15, 20 people just waiting to get in to these properties. There's just
that sort of sounds like gouging almost. I don't know. It feels.
That's why I'm mentioning it, because it should be exposed what some of these landlords are doing.
Yeah, it feels wrong. Really, you're taking advantage of people at that point. Help us understand what's going to happen here, right? You think about the Pacific Coast Highway, Malibu. These are sort of some of the more iconic places in the country. That's why they make a Netflix show about selling these homes that you're a star on. Is this stuff going to get rebuilt, you think?
Yes, I think so. It's going to take a long time. I think the city needs to do things like, for example, maybe exempt the mansion tax, for developers to be encouraged to come in and build here. We're going to need to expedite, the permitting process. And we're going to need California to increase the FAIR plan. The FAIR plan is the California fire insurance that's offered to the state, because right now there are no other options. And the FAIR plan only goes up to $3 million. So most of these homes that burnt down weren't able to be insured through the California FAIR plan. We have to increase that.
Stunning. There's a long list of complaints with Gavin Newsom these days, so add that to the list of things they can fix. Jason, thank you. We'll have you back next week as this develops.
Thank you.
All right. Why the handling of this fire by California's elected officials has many rethinking their decision to even stay in California. Will there be a Cali exodus when we come back? See the smoke coming up rather than going sideways. That gives firefighters a chance to get an upper hand here. But by next week, winds pick back up. Gusts 35 to 45 miles an hour next week. The current red flag warning expires at 6 p.m. Pacific time, an hour from now. And then the conditions get worse come Monday. Meanwhile, some are questioning Gavin Newsom and local leadership's failure to contain these fires when the signs of worse fires were all there. Actor and musician Frank Stallone's been one of the most outspoken. He's here with us in a minute. We start with Nancy Liu, who's been on the ground since this began. And Nancy, I'll set it up for you. You're in front of a friend's house that you'd been at for a housewarming party. I'm just thinking about you and your photographer. I see Will Butkins, your producer, with you as well. How are you guys all holding up as you're reporting not only on this and seeing people go through it, but then it's all your friends, too?
Yeah, it's exhausting out here, and really the air is toxic. The fires, when they broke out, going through the winds, the flames, and it was literally a blowtorch. It's been taxing, but it seems so trivial given the loss so many people are experiencing right now. So we came to this street because I was at a housewarming party just over the summer, and where that big tree is, that fell into the house during the high winds on Tuesday, and my friend was in the house, and then came the fire. And you can see it wiped out the entire neighborhood. This is the house before, and just a wonderful property. My friend and, they had this wonderful party, and we were celebrating what a great house it was, and, all their great fortune. and now this. I mean, it's all lost. And we're not down there, Leland, because we heard gas hissing. And gas crews are on scene here. We see fire crews here putting out hot spots still. But yeah, still a very dynamic situation with fires still burning, Leland.
Well, a reminder, Nancy, of just how fragile things in life are, and a reminder from you, rightfully so, about what's important. Our thanks to you, to your photographer, Nate, Will as well. Great work out there. Thank you. Actor Frank Stallone is with us. Frank, I don't think it's perhaps a surprise to anyone that you've been outspoken about the problems in California for a long time. But you got a lot of friends who are liberals, for lack of a better term, or supporters of Gavin Newsom, Karen Bass. I'm wondering if over the past couple of days, you've been getting some phone calls about, hey, maybe I was wrong, and what were you saying?
Yes, I have, but again, it's a little too late for all that. I mean, we have Crowley, the fire chief, who is totally non-qualified. We have Fionis from Department of Water, who's making $750,000. And we've got a dreadful governor and a dreadful mayor who is the mayor of Los Angeles, not Ghana. So we knew ahead of time there were going to be terrible, terrible Santa Ana winds. And she's in Ghana when she should have been here, and the water should be flowing. I don't know why they're putting fresh water into the ocean to save a smelt, which is basically a bait fish. So that makes no sense. I mean, it just comes from the top on down. It's just ridiculous. And
what's the best phone call you've gotten from a friend of yours who used to be all into the progressive woke stuff?
Well, 2 words. You were right. You're right. You know, I mean, the thing is, I see this stuff here, and I believe we're having environmental terrorism because it's impossible to get an ember from the Pacific Palisades over almost to the Hollywood sign on the top. That's impossible. And if you look in any stores, you can buy portable flamethrowers, road torches.
Yeah, Brian Enton was there. Was one guy got arrested. I want to get this in before we got to run. Your 1983 hit, "Far From Over," the song. I feel like there may be a message there. I know it wasn't written about fires, but there may be a message there.
Well, yeah, we're down, but we're far from over. You know, it's incredible. You know, you pick your friends diligently out here, and I've always been outspoken. I'm not a politician. I'm a musician, but I'm an American citizen. And the sad thing is the people in Altadena who live in these little homes probably have no insurance and probably just have enough money to pay their next bill. They're wiped out.
Yep.
You know, the Palisades are rich people, and this stuff's going to be in litigation for years. So, and Pacific and PCH, all the houses in Malibu, and now there's new codes. It's going to be a real mess, you know, and it's tragic, but it's really tragic for the little guy. But I believe these fires are arson. I really do believe it because it's just too happenstance that it's over here.
You're there. So right to point out. It's always we hear about the celebrities whose homes gets burned down. They can afford it. There's a lot of people who can't, who've lost everything. Look, every house is an American dream. Frank,
of course,
we got to leave it there. Thank you very much. It's a good message.
Okay.
Far from over.
I'm a big fan of you and Chris.
Well, thank you. He's probably listening. He's coming up in 8 minutes, so he's listening and probably jealous.
Okay. Well, give him my best.
Well, you just did, and he's jealous. I hear that you aren't in his show. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you, Leland.
Thank you. The worst of times brings out the best in Americans. There is someone risking their life right now to save the pets owners can't get back to. She joins us next. Wildfires raging through Los Angeles. 150,000 people and their pets had to evacuate. One veterinarian's been taking care of more than 40 animals for their owners amidst the fire. She's opened her home and her animal hospital. Dr. Annie Harvelus is with us now, founder of Animal Wellness Foundation, Animal Wellness Centers, and the vet behind the story with a little girl who needs some help there. Doc, I can't imagine people having to leave and not taking their pets, but I think some people had no choice, and some people were stuck at work or whatever when the evacuation orders came.
Yeah, I think there are some people who they really didn't have a choice but to leave their pets. And And I'm getting a lot of emails right now from people asking us to look out for their pet. We're getting pictures of people's, cats and dogs, and they're saying, if you see them, please let us know. So we are actually at a point now where we're at this phase where we're trying to send out some teams of volunteers to go out and actually look for some animals.
I'm thinking that there's dogs are pretty smart. They can run from fire. I just can't imagine how scared some of them are. I know you got a little one with you that's a rescue there. At some point, I think you just, if you've left and your dog's there, you just sort of have to trust fate and hope that there's somebody like you to find them.
Yeah, I mean, the better thing is to try to figure out a way to get them out while you're still under evacuation. And a lot of people are afraid to take their dog or their cat because it's just so chaotic for them, and they're panicked and scared, and there's a lot that goes along with a dog. You have to bring food and water bowls and all that stuff. And I kind of wanted people to know you don't have to bring all that stuff. Like don't worry about getting the leash. Don't worry about getting food.
Yeah, I think my fiance would take the dog before she took me. I think is the pecking order there. But it's a great point. Just grab them and go.
Just grab them and go. You don't need to worry about anything else. We've got you covered. Yeah. And there's also a lot of pet-friendly hotels out there. There are pet-friendly shelters.
It's a great message.
It's not like it was years ago. We understand the importance of the human-animal bond now, and we're keeping people with their pets.
Well, and you're doing a great job helping with that. God bless you. Thank you. We'll talk to you.
This one needs a home, by the way.
I think we might be able to work on that. We'll put it on social media. Thanks, Doc. Yeah. It's good talking to you.
Thank you.
Everything that's happening in California. There's people living in tents right now, also in North Carolina. We'll have that on Monday about the difficulties and whether they're getting help and the same kind of help as California. Here's Chris.